I posted a video around a week ago talking about my growing disdain for true crime content, and there was one subject I wanted to touch up on in that video, but then I decided I wanted to make a whole video dedicated to this subject. People's fascination with serial killers. Now, before I get on my soapbox about this, I do understand to an extent why people are fascinated by serial killers. They're curious about the human mind, more specifically how someone could be hardwired to commit such horrible acts, and at least gain somewhat of an understanding as to how someone could become so depraved, and of course there's just in general morbid curiosity surrounding dark and taboo subjects, and naturally people are interested in deviations from social norms because of how shunned and how outside of what is considered normal behavior those deviations may be. And for certain people, their morbid curiosity is satiated by learning more about depraved subject matters and people like serial killers. And I myself am no exception. Every once in a while I like reading up on true crime and have read up on a fair share of serial killers. Like I said in my true crime video, there is an active serial killer case going on right here in New York that I semi-keep up with. Long Island serial killer. A suspect was arrested a few years ago. He was charged with a few more murders since and is still awaiting trial. I check out a subreddit about this case every once in a while to see if there's any updates, and my interest in this case mainly stems from me being a New Yorker. I've been to Long Island at several points in my life. I have family and some friends who live in Long Island. So yes, consider me guilty. I have at least a mild interest in the subject of serial killers. So where does my problem with the fascination of serial killers stem from? Well, I don't have a problem with the fascination in itself, just how much of the internet and the media goes about this fascination. A lot of serial killer content tends to paint the killers as these genius masterminds who had the public fooled for so long, thinking they were good people, meanwhile they were doing these horrendous things, unbeknownst to everyone else, when in reality, even if someone seems shady, I would imagine murdering people is near the bottom of the list of things you suspect about that person. It's also tiring hearing friends and families of a killer say, but they seemed like such a normal and good person, I would never suspect them to do such horrible things. And look, I'm not knocking them. Even if the warning signs were staring them right in the face, they never want in a million years to imagine someone they were close to doing something so horrendous. It's the bias of only knowing one side to a person. We naturally don't want to assume the worst about loved ones. And yes, of course, killers take advantage of this bias, but they're not some genius mastermind for doing so. They just have the basic understanding of, unless one day one of my loved ones walk in on me with a corpse, they're likely not going to suspect that I'm a murderer. So I understand and empathize with the shock and betrayal the loved ones of a killer feel when the killer's true nature is unearthed. I just don't like the media and true crime content creators taking this shock and betrayal and using it to spin some kind of narrative that the killer had everyone fooled via their master manipulation tactics. You're giving these people way more credit than they deserve, and you're essentially mythologizing scum of the earth in the name of sensationalizing real-life tragedy for the sake of making a profit. And while we're on the topic of mythologizing mass murderers and giving them more credit than they deserve, it annoys me whenever people paint a killer as some evil mastermind because they may have gone a long time without getting caught. Here is the reality about many serial killers, including some of the most notorious serial killers ever. They primarily prey upon easy targets they think they can have an easier time getting away with murdering. Jeffrey Dahmer primarily killed gay men of color. Factor in also that his crimes took place during the AIDS epidemic, and homophobia was much more normalized in our society than it is now, so police didn't really prioritize or care about victims that were within that demographic. Or the Long Island serial killer, like I mentioned earlier, he primarily targeted prostitutes, and a large reason as to why he went so long without getting caught was because of incompetence on the police's part. I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but the previous previous task force that was investigating his crimes fumbled the case so badly, mismanaged evidence, and were so blatantly corrupt. And then when a new task force was brought in with competent investigators, a suspect was arrested within months. He wasn't some genius mastermind that knew how to get away with mass murder. He just lucked out because the initial task force was so horrible. Or look at even Jack the Ripper, the most mythologized serial killer, and he also primarily went after prostitutes. You're not some fucking criminal mastermind for only killing who you deem as the most convenient and easiest to get away with murdering. At the end of the day, these people were fucking losers preying upon who they knew were the most vulnerable and quote-unquote easy targets. There is nothing to praise about what they did, no kudos to be given when it comes to how smart you think these people were. You're only helping perpetuate the harmful myth that serial killers are smart and suave, which only glorifies these disgusting fucks. Imagine you're the family member or a friend of a victim of a notorious serial killer and you see online discourse about how we should give some kudos to the killer for how they operated. I mean, I still don't condone what they did, but I do still have some minor respect for them in these aspects. I would throw my fucking computer out a window in an instant. I remember YouTube recommending me a video once that was a clip from an interview Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, did with some daytime talk show. And in the clip, he said something to the effect of, I think more people have a capacity to kill than they'd like to admit. If there were no laws surrounding murder, you would see even more murder than you do now, because people wouldn't have a reason to suppress these violent urges. And when I heard that, I was like, yeah, no shit. You would see a lot of people doing a lot of things they would otherwise not do if there were no laws implemented preventing them from doing said thing. But there are so many comments under the video saying things like, I don't condone what this guy did, but you gotta admire his intelligence. This statement really got me thinking. When all he really said in the clip was essentially, oh, if there were no laws, people could do whatever they want, which, again, no fucking shit. Stop trying to find things to admire in people who are not worth admiring. This is a consequence of not only true crime content discussing serial killers, but rather irresponsibly painting these people as more clever and cunning than they really were. If you have a fascination in the subject of serial killers, fine, but for the love of God, don't have these false, mythologized versions of them in your head. And it also wouldn't hurt to read up more about the victims of these killers so they can be humanized and not just be seen to you as just, well, a victim of this notorious serial killer. Because it really does seem like these victims are seen by a lot of people as merely plot devices in the mythos of this mysterious, cunning, and evil character, when these were real people who met premature and tragic ends at the hands of a depraved fuckface. Off the top of your head, can you name the victims of notorious serial killers like Jeffrey Dahmer, or Ted Bundy, or John Wayne Gacy, or whatever other name you want to throw? And this isn't me trying to morally grandstand and throw a gotcha. I can't either. What I'm getting at is, it's a problem. We are so wrapped up in trying to learn more and understand more about a depraved killer that we forget to also humanize the victims and honor them properly, instead of treating them as, again, plot devices in the canon of a serial killer. Again, imagine being a loved one of one of the victims and having to constantly relive the trauma of losing a loved one in such a tragic way because their killer ended up becoming notorious, and on top of that, no one cares about your loved one beyond them just simply being a victim of said notorious serial killer. Just try to have a little bit more empathy for those who are still personally impacted by the heinous actions of these sick individuals. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Bye-bye.